Welcome to the Deep Dive. Ready to unlock your inner negotiation ninja? We're diving into Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. It's a fascinating look at negotiation from, well, hostage situations to everyday conversations.
Exactly. And Voss, he was a former FBI hostage negotiator, by the way, shares tactics that'll help you, navigate almost any negotiation you can think of.
Oh, I'm all ears. So, most of us think of negotiation as kind of logic and strategy. What makes Voss's approach different?
What's really interesting is Voss actually emphasizes emotional intelligence, like more than anything else.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, he says humans, we're emotional creatures. Like, it's just how we are. So, recognizing those emotions, understanding them, both yours and the other person's, that's like absolutely key.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, we've all been in those situations where emotions kind of take over a conversation that should have been totally rational. So how do we actually navigate that emotional minefield using Voss's ideas?
Well, he has this really interesting concept called tactical empathy.
Okay.
And it's not, just feeling bad for someone. It's really about understanding their perspective, what's driving their emotions, what's behind them. And he uses techniques like mirroring, where you repeat back what someone says, and labeling, which is like naming their feelings to make them feel heard and build trust.
So if you say, it sounds like you're feeling frustrated, that would be labeling.
Yeah. Exactly. And it can be so powerful, just that. Like, when people feel understood, they're much more open to collaborating.
Right.
And that's where his idea of getting to know comes in.
Okay, now this is interesting to me. Why would you want someone to say no in a negotiation? Doesn't that just shut things down?
Well, not really. Voss actually suggests that no can be way more valuable than a yes that's not a real commitment.
Oh, okay.
Right. Think about it. Haven't you ever felt more comfortable saying no to something than being pressured to say yes and not really mean it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Right. So a no, it clarifies boundaries. It slows things down, helps people feel in control, and then the real issues, they can kind of surface.
Yeah, that makes sense. So how do you actually encourage someone to say no without derailing the whole negotiation?
One way is to frame your questions so no is a natural response. Like, instead of asking, do you want this? You could ask, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah.
CC. That gives them space to say what they're hesitant about, And another tactic is just to ask what they don't want,
Oh, I see.
so they can express their needs without feeling pressured.
That's really interesting. It kind of flips the script. It seems counterintuitive, but I can see how it would make someone more honest.
Right. And even when you get to yes, Voss says it's meaningless if they don't know how to follow through. So he emphasizes asking how questions a lot to make sure they understand the next steps and feel ownership.
So you're not just looking for agreement, you're looking for a concrete plan. What are some examples of those how questions?
Well, you could ask, how will we know we're on track? Or how will we address things if we find we're off track?
I see.
That not only clarifies the plan, but, it makes them accountable, increases their buy-in.
It makes so much sense. We're seeing emotions and clear communication are so important in Voss's approach. So what about that back and forth of the negotiation? What are his tactics for navigating that?
Well, he uses what he calls calibrated questions.
Okay.
Most people go in with demands and counteroffers, but Voss flips that. He encourages these open-ended questions that start with how or what, to encourage elaboration and problem solving,
So instead of saying, here's what I want, it's more about how can we work this out together?
Yeah. A great example is, how am I supposed to do that?
Oh, okay.
It shifts the power dynamic subtly. Instead of arguing your position, you're asking for their help.
Right.
To solve a problem they've presented. So it creates this illusion of control for them, often leads to more creative solutions.
It's like you're nudging them towards a win-win, but they don't even realize it. That's amazing.
Yeah. Voss also explains how to craft questions to uncover their true motivations. You want to avoid those simple yes or no answers.
Right. Get them talking. Right.
Exactly. Now, this reminds me of something else he emphasizes. Paying attention to what's not being said. Those hidden currents that can make or break the deal, he calls them black swans.
Yeah, black swans. I've heard of that.
Right. Those are those unexpected pieces of information that can completely change the game. So you need what he calls a beginner's mind. like constantly seeking new information, being open to surprises.
So it's about staying curious and asking questions to uncover those hidden factors that could impact everything.
Absolutely. Now, another thing that can impact a negotiation is leverage, your ability to influence the outcome. Voss breaks it down into three types: positive, negative, and normative.
Okay, let's break those down. What's the difference?
Yes. Well, positive leverage is basically having something the other party wants. Like, say you're selling a house and you have multiple offers. That's positive leverage. You can use that competition to your advantage.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about negative leverage? It sounds a bit more intimidating.
It is. It's about the potential for loss or pain. The or else part of a negotiation, like a threat of legal action or maybe losing a valuable customer. Voss cautions against using it aggressively, but even just alluding to it can, shift their thinking.
So instead of a direct threat, it's more like subtly highlighting what they could lose.
Exactly. And then there's normative leverage. It's about appealing to their values and principles, like finding that common ground and using it to build a case.
So it's a more collaborative approach, more ethical, I guess.
Yeah. It's about finding shared values and using them to be more persuasive.
This is all so insightful. We've covered so much already, from tactical empathy to the different types of leverage.
Positive, negative, and normative. But, having leverage is one thing, using it, that's a whole other skill.
Yeah, Voss actually points out that we tend to make a lot of assumptions about the other party's leverage, and that can be a problem, You might miss opportunities or even make mistakes.
So how do you avoid that trap? How do you really figure out someone's leverage and use it to, get a good deal?
Well, one thing Voss really stresses is being willing to walk away.
Oh, okay.
If you're not ready to walk away, you're basically giving up all your leverage. It doesn't mean you have to be totally inflexible.
But knowing your bottom line, that's crucial. And that kind of ties into another point he makes, which is the difference between a good deal and a bad deal. We think we're rational, but our ideas of fairness, they can be pretty irrational.
Yeah, I see what you mean. So how do we, become more aware of our own biases and not get tripped up by that?
Voss suggests something called an accusation audit.
An accusation audit. What's that?
It sounds kind of crazy, but you basically list out the worst things the other person might be thinking about you or your offer up front.
Oh, okay.
It's like, addressing the elephant in the room before he gets a chance to, trample everything.
So you're disarming them,
Yeah.
being transparent.
Building trust. Now, speaking of trust, Voss talks a lot about connecting with the other person, on a deeper level than just the terms of the deal. He mentions understanding their hopes and dreams, right?
Yeah, he does. It's not just about, the nuts and bolts.
Exactly. He says, when you understand their aspirations, you can make a much stronger case for why your solution, your deal, will actually help them achieve those goals.
So it's almost like you're selling them a vision of the future.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not even that grand. It's about understanding their, day-to-day struggles and offering something that makes their life easier, even in small ways.
It's about showing you get them.
Yeah.
Not just focused on your own thing.
Exactly. And a simple way to do that is using the word because.
Because.
Yeah. There's research that shows people are way more likely to do what you ask if you give a reason, even if the reason, it's not that strong.
It's we need a reason, even if it's not totally logical.
Right. It's a powerful little tool. Now, we've talked about emotions, the right questions, but what about when the other person seems completely irrational? How do you negotiate with someone who's, not playing fair?
Yeah, that's tough. What do you do when someone's just being difficult?
Voss has this really interesting take on that. He says we often misinterpret irrational behavior. It's usually something else entirely.
Oh, okay.
He encourages us to see those crazy actions as clues to something we don't understand.
So instead of getting frustrated, you try to figure out what's really going on.
Exactly. He outlines 3 reasons behind those crazy actions. 1, they might just be missing information. 2, there might be some hidden limitations, company policies or rules.
Right.
And 3, they might have other interests, hidden motivations influencing their decisions.
It's like detective work. You've got to piece it all together.
Exactly. And Voss really emphasizes face-to-face interactions whenever possible, because then you can pick up on all those nonverbal cues,
Yeah, makes sense. Body language, tone of voice, you can read them better in person. Speaking of which, Voss mentions a rule about how we communicate. Right. Something about percentages.
Yeah, it's the 7-38-55 rule. based on research by this guy, Albert Mehrabian. Basically, only 7% of a message is the actual words, 38% is tone of voice, and then 55%, that's body language, facial expressions.
Wow. So most of it's not even what you're saying.
Exactly. So, being able to read those nonverbal cues, that can give you a huge advantage. You can see how they're really feeling, spot inconsistencies.
Like if their words and their body language don't match up, that could be a sign. So what are some things we should be looking for?
Well, Voss points out this thing called the Pinocchio effect. Liars, they tend to use a lot more words, more complex sentences. It's like they're overcompensating.
So if someone suddenly gets all jargony, that could be a red flag.
Could be. Pay attention to those little changes.
This is fascinating. We're really getting into the psychology of negotiation here.
Yeah, Voss combines psychology and practical techniques to help us navigate these really complex interactions.
So much to learn. We've covered empathy, the right questions, leverage, nonverbal cues, and there's still more to Voss's book.
Yeah, we still need to talk about how he uses his own name to his advantage, dealing with difficult people, and his system for bargaining, the Ackerman model.
We've learned so much already. Tactical empathy, calibrated questions, leverage, nonverbal cues. What else does Voss have up his sleeve?
Well, there are a few more gems in there. Like this one's kind of interesting. Voss talks about using your own name to your advantage in a negotiation.
Using my own name. How does that work?
It's something he calls the Chris discount. The idea is people are more likely to, be helpful, be open to someone they see as an individual, not just like a faceless entity.
Right.
So by using your name, you kind of humanize yourself, create a connection.
Oh, that's interesting. Like you're breaking down a wall, right?
Exactly. Voss tells the story about how he got a 10% discount at a store just by asking if they had a Chris discount. Sounds crazy, but it worked.
I love that. It shows that sometimes those simple things can be surprisingly effective. So what about dealing with really difficult people? Voss has some thoughts on that, right?
He does. He says instead of labeling someone as difficult, try to understand why they're acting that way.
So be curious instead of judgmental.
Exactly. Remember that everyone has their own, motivations, fears, insecurities. And when you understand those things, you can approach the negotiation with more empathy.
It's about finding that common ground, even when it seems like there's just conflict.
Right. And sometimes that conflict can actually be a good thing.
Oh, how so?
Well, Voss actually encourages negotiators to embrace conflict, like not avoid it, but engage with it respectfully, thoughtfully. He sees it as the foundation for a good negotiation.
So it's not about avoiding disagreement. It's about using it to get to a better outcome.
Exactly. And to help us navigate those, sometimes challenging conversations, Voss has this system he calls the Ackerman model.
The Ackerman model. Okay. Tell me more.
It's a 6-step process. It's a mix of psychology and methodical approach. So first, you set your target price, the ideal outcome you want.
Right, your goal.
Then you make an initial offer that's 65% of your target.
65%, that seems really low. Wouldn't that, anchor the negotiation too low?
It might seem that way, but that low offer, it's like an extreme anchor.
Oh, right.
It creates this perception of value, gives you space to negotiate upwards.
So it's strategic. You're setting yourself up for later.
Exactly. Now, steps 3 and 4, this is where it gets interesting. You use a maximum of 3 raises, but the increments, they get smaller each time. So second offer, 85% of your target, then 95%. And finally, 100%.
So you're moving up, but each step is smaller. Why is that?
It creates this feeling of momentum, like you're making big concessions each time, plays on their desire to, feel like they're winning, squeezing you for every penny.
It's subtle persuasion, leading them towards your goal without them realizing it.
Yeah, and remember, you're using all those calibrated questions, empathy tactics throughout. Keep the conversation going, guide them towards a solution.
It's like a game of chess, almost, but with words, emotions.
Great analogy. Now, step 5 in the Ackerman model is classic Voss. Use a precise, non-round number for your final offer.
Right. He loves those odd numbers.
Right.
He said earlier, that makes it seem more credible, like you've really thought it through.
Exactly. Like $46,872 just sounds more calculated than, $47,000.
That's like you're saying, this is the number, take it or leave it.
Exactly. And finally, the last step, throw in something extra. Not money, but something to sweeten the deal.
Even if it's something they don't really need?
Even then, it's the gesture. That goodwill helps seal the deal. They feel like they got the best possible outcome.
This Ackerman model, it's a really brilliant framework, combining strategy, psychology, just brilliant.
And it can be used for so many things: buying a car, negotiating a salary, even resolving a conflict with a coworker.
This deep dive into never split the difference has been amazing. I feel like I've learned so much that I can actually use, in my own life.
I'm glad to hear that. And honestly, Voss's book has even more in it. Real life examples, more insights. Definitely worth checking out.
Absolutely. So for our listeners, what's the one key takeaway they should remember?
I'd say it's tactical empathy, not being manipulative, but really understanding that human side of every negotiation. When you do that, you can achieve so much more.
Well said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into Never Split the Difference.